We've talked about the fact that they have these young fields with so many dominant golfers, yet it feels like the sport keeps wanting to turn back to Tiger Woods. NASCAR keeps wanting to turn back to the olden days, but those were all dominated typically by one driver, either Richard Petty or Pearson or Dale Earnhardt Sr., and then into the Jimmy Johnson era, and even Jeff Gordon before that. Now, there's drivers, they're dominant, but the races aren't close, but they never really were that close even back in the day when the sport was healthy. I feel like NASCAR is sort of in this weird place where they don't know how to fix it. They just keep throwing darts at a wall and nothing is working.
I think the fans have really recognized the fact that NASCAR is trying to hit a moving target. And the leadership at NASCAR is very poor. I think the France family is, young Brian France, he's done a horrible job.
Do you feel like they just have one foot out the door at this point?
Well, with rumors of them trying to sell NASCAR, I think you're starting to get a sense for that. I think, and it would take a whole show, and listeners know that we're very frustrated about this. We're not going to talk about this long to close out the show. We're very frustrated. It's a sport that we've enjoyed for many, many years, but there's not a lot of storylines. There's not a lot to talk about. This year you have Martinsville was a bad race. Some of the mile and a halves are just, not bad races. They're awful races. Now you go to a road course, and I look forward to Sonoma and Watkins Glen on the schedule because you get to see something different. You used to see guys like Boris Said and even recently A.J. Allmendinger and guys that could run road courses and have specialists come in and do. You're not even seeing that anymore because with iRacing and some of these things, some of these guys like Martin Truex Jr. and Ryan Blaney and Denny Hamlin and they're great at road courses. And so you're not even seeing different people come up and have the ability or the skill level on a different type of track. You're just seeing the same guys. Kevin Harvick's great on a road course. Kyle Busch is great on a road course. Take nothing from their talent, but you're just going to get more of the same. Martin Truex Jr. was going to win that race by 25 seconds if he hadn't basically backed off to make sure he didn't screw it up or have any bad strategy at the end. He still won by, I think, 11 or 12 seconds, but he had enough of a lead to give up 13 seconds, which we've talked about before is an eternity on the racetrack. That's ridiculous. You shouldn't have that. I remember when Sonoma years back used to be guys coming through that chicane at the end, that tight paperclip corner then, and then basically beating and banging, trying to push each other against either the tires or the wall to come around turn 12 and hit that line. You don't see that anymore. It's going to be Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., doesn't matter what track we go to, they're going to dominate. NASCAR has a major problem. You're right. France has a foot out the door. He knows. He's aware that this sport is tumbling. I think the expense of getting in the sport, we've talked about Matt DiBenedetto and Coke Racing, other small teams that are just struggling. And I just think you're pushing more and more parity out and funneling it all to the top 10, 12, 15 guys. Any given race, it's a handful of guys that are going to win, and basically the other 35 don't have a chance.
That's the biggest problem is right now. And look, you can't take away from the talent that Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. have. They're three of the most talented drivers that get behind the wheel, and they just happen to be in some of the best equipment that's in the sport. So it's a bad mix. The problem for being a fan is those three are not fighting it out. They're not on the track all within a second of each other where you're waiting to see these rivalries matriculate and start to take place and watch them mature over the course of a year and how they interact. They're all friends with each other. And really, once a car gets out in front, unless you get a late caution, there's just nothing that the sport is building on. And I'm not advocating that there needs to be wrecks, but when I turn on a race and I invest 2.5, 3 hours into watching a race, I don't want to see the leader up by 25 seconds with 10 laps to go, knowing that no matter if Kevin Harvick is 2 seconds a lap faster, he's still not going to catch him at that point. That is the problem that NASCAR is in now. There's just such a competitive edge for the cars that get out in front, no matter where they run. It's just killing the sport. Even the Xfinity race in Iowa, it did a 1.1 rating with no Cup drivers in it. And you turn around, that was on a Sunday at 5 o'clock. And I believe that was going up against the U.S. Open. And now you have NASCAR with basically a Sunday all to themselves outside of soccer, and they only get a 1.6 rating. That is a major problem. That is telling you that there's something wrong with what you're doing as a sport. You're not attracting fans, and you're running off the ones that are here because at some point now that the summer is here, it's nice. I start thinking about if it's not a Saturday night race and I'm not home, if it's a Sunday, like, well, I'd rather be at the pool and hanging out and getting some sun versus sitting at home watching a television going, why am I not outside? Why am I watching a race where one car is up by 9 seconds and I'm hoping for a stage break or a late caution?
There are many times we've texted back and forth and said, hey, are you DVRing the race? Yeah, I'm DVRing the race as well. I'll watch it later. But we don't actually watch it later on regular speed.
We'll say, don't ruin it for me. And eventually one of us will say, did I miss anything?
Yeah, you didn't miss anything.
No,
and
just
you can
come up
watch
to this lap.
You just get single file parade laps the whole way around. And as I was saying with the DVR, you can put it on fast forward, let it just go round and round and round, pause it if something happens. Other than that, when a guy has a 10-second lead, it's not even hard to tell and fast forward what's going on.
And it's like we talked about last week with golf. It's the fact that if you can get a couple stars mixed in and they come into Sunday and they're within 2 or 3 strokes of each other, you're engaged. You really don't care who else is chasing a Dustin Johnson or a Spieth or a McIlroy or a Fowler. You don't care about the other names. It's just the fact that there is competition out there. And you're like, okay, what's going to happen on 16, on 17, on 18? If you turn on the television and Dustin Johnson has a 10-stroke lead on the 9th hole, why would you sit there and watch it? You're basically hoping for a catastrophic failure that he's going to tin cup it or Sergio it at the Masters and get a 15. And even at that rate, it might not be enough. That's my problem with NASCAR is just when you turn it on and there's not competition, even among your best, they can't stay with each other. They're not even racing each other. You're not on Twitter with, oh, it's 25 to go and the 3 leaders are under a blanket. You don't get that kind of racing. Where's the sport going here? How is it going to keep growing? I think the ratings for the Xfinity race at Iowa were so good because it was a good race. Bell and Allgaier were on each other basically the whole last stage. You were watching it saying, I wonder what's going to happen. You were waiting for one of them to make a mistake. One of them wasn't out by 10 seconds. That would have shot viewership down. So for me, that's the problem. It's not the fact that one guy is winning a lot and other guys aren't. It's just the how they're doing it. I mean, those guys are so far above anyone else. You start to go, okay, you have Daytona coming up. That's a plate track. That's a wild card. We might get a different winner then. But Chicagoland coming up, that's going to be a track that probably Harvick, Truex, and Kyle Busch will be the favorites. They're going to run up front all day. And unless they wreck or get a pit road penalty or something like that, there's not going to be any room for anyone else because they're so good. And it's hurting the sport, in my opinion.
I would love to hear Jeff Gluck or Bob Pockross or some of the great writers who cover this sport and have for years really be honest and talk about sort of the death of this sport and what may lie ahead for NASCAR, because I think that's where you hear the passion in our voices, is that we might be looking at a pastime and a sport that we've followed for decades dying on the vine. And so that's just very unfortunate because it could be a major sport that we no longer have. I'd love to hear from those guys what they think about the France family, NASCAR, and the state of racing as a whole. And listeners, if you follow us on Twitter, which I hope you do, let us know what you think. Follow at TalkbackJustin, at TalkbackEric, and of course our corporate page at TalkbackFanTalk. Engage with us about NASCAR. Let us know what you think would fix the sport of NASCAR, because this is something that we care a lot about. Let's throw out some ideas. Let's see if we can get a guy like Jeff Gluck to write a story about this. Let's see if Bob Pockross can say, yeah, you're right. This sport sucks right now, and here's what needs to happen. We've got to do something that moves the needle, or nothing's going to change. That's going to do it for this episode of Talk Back. A lot to be passionate about in the world of sports. We appreciate you following us. Thanks for listening. We'll talk back at you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Talk Back. Staying current on sports is our #1 goal, so we drop a new episode each Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or the podcatcher of your choice. For more info about the show, to meet the hosts, or to partner with us on future episodes, please visit TalkbackFanTalk.com. We really enjoy hearing your take on the world of sports, even when you disagree. After all, this show is dedicated to you, the fans. So get direct access to us on Twitter using @TalkbackJustin and @TalkbackEric. Check out our corporate feed on Twitter and Instagram using the handle @TalkbackFanTalk. We hope you have a great week. We'll talk back at you next time.